The morning sun was just starting to break through the clouds when Chief Robert Johnson finished his daily jog around the neighborhood. Sweat dripped down his face as he slowed to a walk, checking his fitness tracker. 5 miles done, just like every Tuesday for the past 3 years. At 42 years old, he made sure to stay in shape, not just for himself but to set an example for the officers under his command. Robert pulled out his phone and saw several missed calls from the station. Nothing urgent, just routine check-ins from his deputy chief about the morning briefing. He'd been the police chief of Millbrook for 6 years now, and mornings like this reminded him why he loved the job. The community was peaceful, crime rates were down, and his officers were doing excellent work building relationships with local residents. As he walked the last few blocks toward his car, Robert remembered he had an important stop to make. For months, he'd been planning a new community outreach program that would help local kids stay out of trouble during summer break. The program would offer sports activities, mentoring, and educational workshops. But to make it happen, he needed to set up a special bank account to handle donations and funding from various sources. He'd been putting off this banking trip for weeks, always finding some excuse. Today felt different, though. The morning jog had cleared his head, and he had some free time before his afternoon meetings. Plus, the bank would be quiet on a Tuesday morning, making it the perfect time to handle his personal business without running into half the town. Robert drove to First National Bank, the same institution where he'd had his personal accounts for over 15 years. The building sat on Main Street right in the heart of downtown Millbrook. Its red brick facade and tall windows gave it an old-fashioned charm that matched the rest of the historic district. He'd driven past this bank thousands of times during his patrols, but today he was just another customer. The parking lot was nearly empty when he arrived at 10:30. Robert grabbed his wallet and phone, then realized he probably looked pretty casual for a business meeting. His jogging clothes were clean but definitely not banker attire. He had on gray athletic shorts, a navy blue t-shirt with his gym's logo, and running shoes that had seen better days. For a moment he considered driving home to change, but then shrugged it off. This was 2024 and people dressed casually for everything these days. The bank's lobby felt cool and refreshing after his morning run. The marble floors reflected the overhead lights and the familiar smell of air conditioning, mixed with coffee from the customer service area. A few customers sat in the waiting area, quietly scrolling through their phones or reading magazines. The atmosphere was calm and professional, exactly what Robert expected from his longtime bank. He walked to the customer information desk where a young teller named David was organizing some paperwork. David looked up with a friendly smile, the kind that said he genuinely enjoyed helping people with their banking needs. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" "Morning," Robert replied, pulling out his identification. "I need to speak with someone about opening a new business account. It's for a community program I'm starting." David nodded and glanced at Robert's driver's license. "Absolutely, Chief Johnson. Let me see who's available to help you with that. Business accounts usually require some additional documentation, but we can definitely get you started." Robert appreciated that David recognized him from his ID rather than making assumptions. Over the years, he'd learned that people often had mixed reactions when they realized who he was. Some became overly friendly, others seemed nervous, and a few acted like they wanted to discuss every traffic ticket they'd ever received. "Take your time," Robert said. "I'm not in any rush." While David made some phone calls to arrange the meeting, Robert found a comfortable chair in the waiting area. He pulled out his phone to check messages and noticed several texts from his deputy chief about the community program. The city council had approved additional funding that morning, which meant they could expand their plans to include a small gymnasium rental for basketball activities. As he typed responses to his team, Robert felt someone watching him. He glanced up and noticed the bank manager observing him from her glass office. She appeared to be a woman in her 40s with short blonde hair and a serious expression. When their eyes met briefly, she quickly looked away, pretending to focus on something on her computer screen. Robert didn't think much of it. Bank managers probably kept an eye on everyone in the lobby as part of their security routine. He went back to his phone, coordinating with his officers about an upcoming community safety meeting scheduled for later that week. The texts were coming in faster now as his team got excited about the expanded program budget. Officer Martinez wanted to know if they could include a soccer component. Sergeant Thompson suggested adding a career day where kids could learn about different jobs in public service. Detective Walsh thought they should partner with the fire department for some safety demonstrations. Robert smiled as he typed back responses, feeling energized by his team's enthusiasm. This was exactly the kind of positive police work he wanted to focus on. Building relationships, preventing problems before they started, and showing kids that law enforcement officers were real people who cared about their community. His phone rang, and he saw it was Deputy Chief Anderson calling about the morning's incident reports. Robert answered quietly, keeping his voice low out of respect for the bank's peaceful atmosphere. "Morning, Anderson. What's the status on that traffic situation downtown?" "All clear, Chief. We had 3 units respond to that fender bender on Oak Street, but everyone's fine. No injuries, minimal property damage. The tow trucks just finished clearing the scene." "Good to hear. Any other issues I should know about?" "Nothing major. Officer Kim is following up on that vandalism report from yesterday, and we've got the monthly community board meeting tonight at 7.
Are you still planning to attend?"
Robert glanced around the bank lobby, making sure his conversation wasn't disturbing anyone. "Definitely. I want to present the youth program proposal to the board. With this new funding, we can really make an impact. The officers are excited about it, Chief. This could change how the whole community sees us." "That's the goal, Anderson. Building trust takes time, but programs like this show people that we're invested in their success, not just catching them when they make mistakes." After ending the call, Robert noticed that David was still working on arranging his meeting. Banking could be slow sometimes, especially when it involved setting up new business accounts with all their requirements and regulations. He didn't mind waiting, though. The chair was comfortable, the lobby was quiet, and he was enjoying the chance to catch up on department communications without constant interruptions. As he scrolled through his emails, Robert found himself planning the presentation he'd give to the community board that evening. He wanted to emphasize how the youth program would create positive interactions between police officers and local families. Too often, the only time cops met kids was during negative situations. This program would change that dynamic completely. The bank manager was still in her office, occasionally glancing toward the lobby area. Robert noticed her speaking quietly on her phone, but assumed she was handling regular business matters. He had no reason to think her attention had anything to do with him. Jennifer Mitchell had been the branch manager at First National Bank for 8 years, and she prided herself on maintaining a secure environment for both customers and staff. From her glass office, she had a clear view of the entire lobby, and she made it her business to observe everyone who walked through those doors. When the man in athletic clothes entered that Tuesday morning, something immediately caught her attention. It wasn't unusual for people to dress casually when doing banking, but there was something about his demeanor that made her take a second look. He moved with confidence, scanning the lobby in a way that seemed methodical rather than casual. Jennifer watched as he approached David at the customer service desk. She couldn't hear their conversation from her office, but she noticed how the man presented his identification and gestured while speaking. David seemed friendly enough, but Jennifer had trained her staff to be courteous to everyone, regardless of any concerns they might have. What really got her attention was when the man settled into the waiting area and immediately pulled out his phone. Jennifer had attended several security seminars over the years, and one thing that stuck with her was how criminals often used phones to coordinate activities or communicate with accomplices outside. The way this customer kept checking his phone and typing messages set off small alarm bells in her mind. She tried to focus on her paperwork, but her eyes kept drifting back to the lobby. The man appeared to be in his early 40s, physically fit in a way that suggested either military or law enforcement background. That observation should have been reassuring, but instead it made Jennifer more nervous. She'd read news stories about people impersonating officers or using fake credentials. Her anxiety increased when she noticed how he positioned himself in the waiting area. He'd chosen a seat that gave him a view of both the front entrance and the teller windows. Jennifer told herself she was being paranoid, but years of security training had taught her to trust her instincts. The phone activity continued, and Jennifer found herself wondering what kind of legitimate business required so many text messages and calls during a simple banking visit. She watched him type rapidly, pause to read responses, then type again. The pattern reminded her of someone coordinating multiple people or activities. Jennifer decided to call her assistant manager, Robert Chen, into her office. Robert had worked in banking for 12 years and had excellent instincts about people and situations. She valued his opinion and wanted a second perspective before she let her imagination run wild. "Robert, can you come in here for a minute?" she said quietly into her desk phone. When Robert arrived, Jennifer gestured toward the lobby. "See the customer in the waiting area? The one with the gray shorts and navy shirt? What's your impression?" Robert glanced through the glass wall and observed for a moment. "Looks like a regular customer to me. David's probably setting him up with an account officer. Why, is something bothering you about him?" "I don't know exactly. He's been on his phone constantly since he arrived, and there's something about how he's watching everything that makes me uncomfortable." Robert looked again, more carefully this time. "I see what you mean about the phone usage. But honestly, Jennifer, that describes half our customers these days. Everyone's always texting or taking calls." Jennifer nodded, but the feeling in her stomach didn't go away. "Maybe you're right. I've just been reading too many security bulletins lately." After Robert left her office, Jennifer tried to concentrate on her work, but she kept finding herself looking up at the lobby. The customer was still there, still on his phone, still appearing to survey the bank's layout. She noticed him glance toward the security cameras at one point, which made her even more nervous. Then his phone rang, and Jennifer watched him answer it with what appeared to be practiced efficiency. She couldn't hear his words, but his body language suggested this was an important call. He stood up, walked a few steps away from other customers, and began speaking in what looked like a serious, focused manner. The conversation lasted several minutes, and Jennifer found herself trying to read his lips or interpret his gestures. At one point, he seemed to be giving directions or instructions to someone. His hand movements were precise, almost like he was describing locations or pointing out specific details. Jennifer's heart rate increased as she remembered a security workshop about how bank robbers often conducted surveillance before attempting a crime. They would visit during quiet periods, observe security measures, note the positions of cameras and alarms, and sometimes coordinate with accomplices who remained outside. She reached for her desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook where she kept security observations. Jennifer began writing down details about the customer: approximate age, height, clothing, behavior patterns, and the times of his phone calls. If something did happen, this information could be valuable for investigators. The man finished his phone call and returned to his seat. But instead of putting his phone away, he immediately began typing again. Jennifer counted at least 6 different text message exchanges while she watched. Each time he would read something, think for a moment, then type a response. The pattern suggested ongoing communication with multiple people. What made it worse was that David still hadn't returned with information about the business account meeting. Jennifer knew that business accounts could take time to arrange, especially if they needed to check the customer's background or verify his business credentials. But the delay meant this potentially suspicious person would be in her lobby even longer. Jennifer's training had taught her that legitimate bank customers usually showed some signs of impatience when meetings were delayed. They might check their watches, ask for updates, or express mild frustration. This customer showed none of those behaviors. He seemed perfectly content to wait, which struck Jennifer as unusual for someone who was supposedly conducting routine business. She picked up her desk phone and called David at the customer service station. "David, it's Jennifer. How's the business account setup going for that customer?" "Still working on it, Ms. Mitchell. I'm trying to reach Linda in business services, but she's with another client right now. Should be just a few more minutes." "What kind of business account is he looking to open?" "Something related to a community program, I think. He mentioned it was for youth activities or something like that." Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. Community programs sounded legitimate, but they could also be covers for other activities. Money laundering operations sometimes used fake charities or community organizations as fronts. She'd learned about these schemes during her banking compliance training. Did he provide any documentation about this community program? Articles of incorporation, tax-exempt status, anything like that? He said he was just getting started with the setup process. I figured Linda could help him with all the requirements once they meet. After hanging up, Jennifer realized she was probably overreacting, but the combination of factors kept bothering her. The constant phone activity, the careful observation of the bank, the vague description of his business purpose. and his unusual comfort with waiting all added up to something that felt wrong. She decided to call the security company that monitored their alarm system. Not to report an emergency, but just to let them know she was keeping an eye on a potentially suspicious situation. If nothing happened, no harm done. If something did develop, they would already be aware of her concerns. This is Jennifer Mitchell at First National Bank on Main Street. I wanted to let you know we have a customer who's exhibiting some behavior that's making me a little nervous. I'm probably being overly cautious, but I thought you should know. The security operator took down the basic details and assured Jennifer that they would monitor the situation. He also reminded her to trust her instincts and not hesitate to call if anything escalated. As Jennifer hung up the phone, she saw the customer's phone ring again. This time, his conversation appeared even more intense than before. Chief Johnson was starting to feel like his simple banking errand was taking much longer than expected. He'd been waiting for almost 20 minutes, and while he didn't mind the delay, he was beginning to worry about his schedule for the rest of the day. The community board meeting that evening was important, and he still needed to review his presentation materials and coordinate with his deputy chief about staffing for the weekend. His phone buzzed with another text message from Sergeant Thompson, this one containing photos of the proposed location for their youth basketball program. The community center had a small gymnasium that would be perfect for their needs, but they needed to finalize the rental agreement before the summer season started. Robert looked at the photos and typed back his approval, then forwarded the information to Deputy Chief Anderson with a note about moving ahead with the booking. These were exactly the kinds of positive developments that made his job worthwhile. Instead of just responding to problems after they happened, they were creating opportunities to prevent issues before they started. Another message came in, this one from Officer Martinez about the soccer equipment they'd discussed. Local sporting goods stores were willing to donate gear for the program, but they needed someone to coordinate pickup and delivery. Robert made a mental note to assign that task to one of his community liaison officers. As he typed responses to his team, Robert noticed the bank manager was still in her office, still occasionally glancing toward the lobby. She seemed to be on the phone more than usual, and her body language suggested she was dealing with something stressful. Banking could be a demanding job, especially when dealing with regulatory requirements and customer service expectations. His phone rang again, and Robert saw it was Deputy Chief Anderson calling back about the evening meeting preparation. Anderson, what's the update on tonight's presentation materials? Everything's ready, Chief. Officer Walsh finished the statistical analysis showing crime reduction in areas where we've increased community engagement. The numbers are really impressive. Good. What about the budget breakdown for the youth program? All set. The City Council's additional funding means we can serve twice as many kids as originally planned. We're looking at about 60 participants for the summer session. Robert felt a surge of pride hearing those numbers. 60 kids who would spend their summer in productive activities instead of potentially getting into trouble. 60 families who would interact with police officers in positive, supportive environments. Any concerns from the officers about the extra time commitment? Robert asked, keeping his voice low to avoid disturbing other bank customers. Actually, Chief, it's the opposite. We've got more volunteers than we have positions. Officer Kim wants to teach a photography workshop. Detective Walsh is interested in starting a junior detective program, and even some of our veteran officers are asking to get involved. This news made Robert even more excited about the presentation that evening. When cops were enthusiastic about community programs, it showed in their interactions with residents. Authentic engagement couldn't be faked, and the community would recognize the genuine commitment from his officers. Make sure to include that volunteer information in tonight's presentation. The board needs to know this isn't just another assignment for our people. They're genuinely excited about making a difference. After ending the call, Robert realized he'd been speaking longer than intended and hoped he hadn't been too loud. He glanced around the lobby and noticed that the other customers didn't seem bothered by his conversation. Banking lobbies were designed to accommodate phone calls and business discussions. David appeared at the customer service desk and waved him over. Finally, it looked like they were ready to discuss the business account setup. Sorry for the wait, Chief Johnson. Linda Rodriguez, our business services manager, is ready to meet with you now. Her office is just down the hall. Robert gathered his phone and wallet, then followed David through a corridor lined with private offices. The bank's business services area was quieter than the main lobby, with thick carpets and professional artwork on the walls. Linda's office was at the end of the hall, and she greeted him with a warm smile. "Chief Johnson, it's a pleasure to meet you. I apologize for the delay. David mentioned you're interested in opening an account for a community program." "That's right," Robert said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "We're launching a youth outreach initiative this summer, and I need a dedicated account to handle donations and funding from various sources." Linda opened a folder and pulled out several forms. "Community programs are wonderful. Can you tell me more about the specific activities you're planning?" Robert explained the basketball and soccer components, the educational workshops, and the mentoring opportunities they wanted to provide. As he spoke, Linda took notes and asked thoughtful questions about the program's goals and expected participation numbers. "This sounds like exactly the kind of initiative our community needs," Linda said. "The bank actually has a community investment program that might provide additional support for your efforts. Have you considered applying for local grants or corporate sponsorships?" "We're exploring several funding options," Robert replied. "The city council approved our basic budget, but we're always looking for ways to expand our reach." As they worked through the account setup paperwork, Robert's phone continued to buzz with messages from his officers. He tried to keep the interruptions to a minimum, but coordinating a police department required constant communication, especially when they were planning new initiatives. "I'm sorry about all the phone activity," Robert apologized after responding to an urgent text about patrol coverage. "We're launching this community program while maintaining all our regular operations, so there's a lot of coordination involved." "Please don't worry about it," Linda said. "I work with business owners all the time, and I know how demanding it can be to manage multiple projects." While Linda processed the initial paperwork, Robert's phone rang with what sounded like an urgent call from the dispatch center. He recognized the number and knew he should probably answer it, even though he was in the middle of a business meeting. "Excuse me for just a moment," he said to Linda, then answered the phone. "Chief Johnson." "Chief, this is Dispatcher Williams. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation developing downtown that might require your attention." Robert's stomach tightened. Downtown situations could mean anything from traffic accidents to more serious incidents. What's the nature of the problem? "We're getting reports of a suspicious person at the First National Bank on Main Street. The bank manager called it in about 10 minutes ago. She's concerned about someone who might be casing the building for a potential robbery." Robert felt his blood pressure spike, but not for the reason the dispatcher expected. He was sitting in the First National Bank on Main Street, and as far as he knew, he was the only customer who had been in the lobby for any extended period. "Can you give me more details about this suspicious person?" Robert asked, trying to keep his voice calm while Linda continued working on his paperwork. "Male, early 40s, physically fit, wearing athletic clothes, gray shorts and navy shirt. The manager says he's been on his phone constantly, appears to be coordinating with people outside the building, and has been observing the bank's security measures." Robert looked down at his own outfit. Gray athletic shorts, navy blue t-shirt from his gym. His heart started pounding as he realized what was happening. "How many units are responding to this call?" 3 patrol cars are en route. Detective Walsh is also heading that direction since bank robberies fall under his jurisdiction. They should arrive within the next few minutes." Robert closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In all his years of law enforcement, he'd never been on the receiving end of a suspicious person call. The irony of the situation would have been funny if it weren't so potentially embarrassing for everyone involved. "Dispatcher Williams, I need you to contact those responding units immediately and advise them that the situation is not what it appears to be." "Chief, I'm not sure I understand." "The suspicious person they're responding to investigate is me. I'm currently sitting in the bank's business services office opening an account for our youth program." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh no, Chief, I'm so sorry. I'll contact the units right away and cancel the response." "Actually, don't cancel it completely. Have them come to the bank, but tell them to approach normally. Not as an emergency response. We need to handle this situation carefully." Robert ended the call and looked at Linda, who had obviously overheard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. Her face had gone pale and she appeared to be struggling with how to respond. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," Robert said quietly. "The bank manager apparently called the police about me. The sound of sirens approaching the bank made everyone in the building freeze. Linda Rodriguez looked out her office window and saw 3 patrol cars pulling into the parking lot, their red and blue lights flashing against the afternoon sun. Her face had turned completely white as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. "Chief Johnson, I am so incredibly sorry," Linda whispered, her voice shaking. "I had no idea that Jennifer had called the police." "This is absolutely mortifying." Robert remained calm, though inside he was processing the complex emotions of finding himself on the wrong side of a police response. After 20 years in law enforcement, he understood exactly what his officers were thinking as they approached the bank. They believed they were responding to a potential robbery in progress, and their training would have them prepared for the worst-case scenario. "It's not your fault, Linda," Robert said quietly. "These situations happen more often than people realize. The important thing is that we handle it properly from here." Through the office window, they could see the officers taking positions around the building. Detective Walsh was coordinating with the patrol units, and Robert recognized Sergeant Thompson approaching the front entrance. These were good officers, well-trained professionals who would follow protocol precisely. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Deputy Chief Anderson, who had obviously been contacted by dispatch about the situation. "Chief, we're handling the bank response. Stay put and let us sort this out." "I need to go out there and identify myself before this gets more complicated," Robert told Linda. "The longer I stay hidden in this office, the more confusing it becomes for everyone." Linda nodded, still looking shocked by the turn of events. "Should I come with you? I can explain to Jennifer what was really happening. Let me handle the police response first. Then we can address the banking side of things." Robert walked through the corridor toward the main lobby, his mind racing through the best way to approach this delicate situation. He'd been in Jennifer's position before, making judgment calls about suspicious behavior, and he couldn't entirely blame her for being cautious. Bank security was a serious responsibility, and managers were trained to report anything that seemed unusual. As he entered the lobby, Robert could see several officers through the glass doors. They were maintaining a professional perimeter, not charging in with weapons drawn, which showed excellent restraint and training. Detective Walsh caught sight of him through the window and did a double take, clearly recognizing his chief even in civilian clothes. Robert walked slowly toward the front entrance, keeping his hands visible and moving in a way that wouldn't startle anyone. He pushed open the glass door and stepped outside, where Sergeant Thompson was coordinating the response. "Chief," Thompson said, his expression shifting from tactical alertness to confusion. "Sir, we received a call about a suspicious person inside the bank." "I know, Thompson. That suspicious person was me." The other officers looked at each other with expressions ranging from embarrassment to disbelief. Officer Martinez, who had been positioned near the side entrance, shook his head and walked over to join the group. "Chief, please tell me this is some kind of training exercise," Martinez said. "I wish it were," Robert replied. "I was here opening a business account for our youth program when the bank manager apparently decided I looked suspicious." Detective Walsh approached the group, and Robert could see him trying to process the situation. "Sir, the bank manager specifically reported someone who appeared to be coordinating criminal activity and surveying the building's security measures. I was coordinating our community program and answering texts from you guys about tonight's presentation," Robert explained. "As for surveying security measures, I glanced at the cameras the same way any customer might." The officers stood in awkward silence, realizing they had just responded to investigate their own police chief. Robert could see the wheels turning in their minds as they tried to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. "What do you want us to do, Chief?" Sergeant Thompson asked. "First, thank you all for your professional response. You followed protocol exactly as you should have. Second, we need to go inside and address this situation with the bank manager in a way that's educational rather than confrontational." Robert led his officers back into the bank lobby, where Jennifer Mitchell was standing near her office door looking absolutely horrified. The few customers who had been in the bank during the incident were staring with wide eyes, clearly confused about what was happening. Jennifer approached the group hesitantly, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Officers, I'm the one who called this in. I was concerned that—" "Ma'am, this is Chief Robert Johnson of the Millbrook Police Department," Detective Walsh said formally. "He was conducting personal banking business when you reported him as suspicious." The words hit Jennifer like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she could speak. "Chief Johnson? You're the police chief?" That's correct, Robert said, extending his hand in a gesture of professional courtesy. And you must be Jennifer Mitchell, the branch manager. Jennifer shook his hand weakly, her eyes filling with tears of mortification. Chief, I'm so sorry. I thought. Your phone calls and the way you were observing everything, I genuinely believed you might be planning something. Can you help me understand what specific behaviors made you suspicious? Robert asked, his tone remaining calm and educational rather than accusatory. You were on your phone constantly and it looked like you were coordinating with people outside. You seemed to be studying the bank's layout and security cameras. When David said you wanted to open a business account but couldn't provide much documentation, it raised red flags about potential money laundering. Robert nodded thoughtfully. I can see how those observations might seem concerning when viewed through a security lens. The phone calls were with my officers about our community program and tonight's city council presentation. The so-called coordination was me approving equipment purchases and scheduling decisions. Officer Martinez stepped forward. Chief, those texts you were sending about the basketball equipment? That was part of what made her suspicious? Apparently so, Robert confirmed. And my interest in the business account was completely legitimate. I'm trying to set up proper financial management for our youth outreach program. Jennifer looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Chief Johnson, I don't know how to apologize enough. I've never been so embarrassed in my entire career. Jennifer, I want you to know that I don't hold this against you personally, Robert said. Bank security is important and managers should report suspicious activity. But I think this situation gives us an opportunity to talk about unconscious bias and how it can affect our judgment. The lobby had fallen completely silent except for the quiet conversation between the police chief and the bank manager. The other customers were listening intently, sensing they were witnessing something significant. I've been banking here for 15 years, Robert continued. David recognized me immediately from my identification. But somehow, when you observed a black man in casual clothes conducting business that seemed unusual to you, your mind went to criminal activity rather than legitimate purposes. Jennifer's tears started flowing freely. You're absolutely right, and I'm ashamed of myself. I pride myself on treating everyone equally, but my actions today show that I have work to do. Detective Walsh and the other officers watched this exchange with fascination and respect. They were seeing their chief handle a difficult situation with grace and turn it into a teaching moment rather than an opportunity for anger or retaliation. The important thing is what we do moving forward, Robert said. This incident doesn't define you as a person, but it should prompt some serious reflection about assumptions and biases that we all carry. Linda Rodriguez appeared from the business services area, having watched the entire interaction. Chief Johnson, I want to personally apologize as well. I should have communicated better with Jennifer about your legitimate business here. Linda, you handled everything perfectly, Robert assured her. There was no reason for you to anticipate this situation. Robert turned back to Jennifer. I'd like to suggest that this experience become part of a broader conversation about implicit bias in our community. Not to embarrass you, but to help everyone learn from what happened here today. 3 months later, Chief Robert Johnson stood in the same bank lobby where his world had been turned upside down on that Tuesday morning. Today, however, he was there for a much different reason. The First National Bank was hosting a community forum on bias awareness, and Jennifer Mitchell had specifically asked him to be the keynote speaker. The lobby was packed with local residents, business owners, bank employees, and several of his police officers. Folding chairs had been arranged in rows, and a small podium stood near the customer service area where David had first greeted Robert on that memorable day. Jennifer approached him before the event began, looking nervous but determined. Over the past few months, she had thrown herself into bias training and community education with remarkable dedication. The bank had implemented new protocols for security assessments, and Jennifer had become an advocate for examining unconscious prejudices in professional settings. Chief Johnson, I want to thank you again for agreeing to speak tonight, Jennifer said. I know this situation was painful for you, and your willingness to turn it into something positive means everything to our community. Jennifer, your response to what happened has been nothing short of inspiring, Robert replied. It takes courage to admit mistakes publicly and work to make things better. The youth program that had started this entire chain of events was now in full swing. 62 kids were participating in basketball, soccer, educational workshops, and mentoring activities. The program had exceeded every expectation, with waiting lists for next year already forming. More importantly, the relationships between police officers and local families had transformed in ways that surprised everyone. Officer Martinez walked over to join their conversation. "Chief, the Rodriguez family wanted me to tell you how much their son Miguel is enjoying the photography workshop. He's talking about maybe studying criminal justice when he gets to college." "That's exactly what we hoped would happen," Robert said. "When kids see us as mentors and coaches instead of just authority figures, it changes their whole perspective on law enforcement." The forum began with Jennifer explaining the events of that Tuesday morning in March. She spoke honestly about her assumptions and the thought process that led her to call the police on their own police chief. Her voice shook slightly as she described the embarrassment and shame she felt when she realized her mistake. "I want everyone here to understand that I'm not a bad person," Jennifer said to the crowd. "I don't consider myself prejudiced or racist. But that day I learned that having good intentions isn't enough. We all carry unconscious biases that can affect our decisions, especially in stressful situations." When Robert took the podium, he looked out at faces representing the diversity of Millbrook. Young and old, different races and backgrounds, all gathered to discuss an uncomfortable but necessary topic. 3 months ago, I walked into this bank as a customer and left as an example of how bias can affect anyone. Anywhere, Robert began. "I want to be clear about something from the start. I don't blame Jennifer for what happened. She made a judgment call based on what she observed, and bank security is a real responsibility." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "But I also want everyone to understand the impact of those kinds of judgments. For 42 years, I've lived with the reality that my appearance, my race, can make people uncomfortable or suspicious, regardless of my qualifications or intentions. That day in the bank reminded me that even holding the position of police chief doesn't shield me from those assumptions." Robert described the strange feeling of being investigated by his own officers, the surreal moment when Detective Walsh realized he was looking for his own boss, and the complex emotions that followed. But he also emphasized the positive changes that had emerged from the incident. "The youth program we were trying to set up that day has become more successful than we ever imagined. Kids who might have grown up fearing police officers are now seeing us as coaches, mentors, and friends. That's the kind of change that prevents future problems instead of just responding to them." Deputy Chief Anderson, sitting in the front row, raised his hand. "Chief, can you talk about how this experience changed your approach to law enforcement?" "Absolutely," Robert replied. "It reminded me that bias training can't be a one-time workshop. It has to be ongoing, honest, and personal. We've implemented monthly discussions where officers can talk about situations where they caught themselves making assumptions. It's made our entire department more thoughtful about our interactions with the community." A young woman near the back of the room stood up. "Chief Johnson, how do we teach our children to navigate these kinds of situations? My son is 10 years old, and I worry about how people will perceive him as he gets older." Robert's expression softened. This was the question that kept him awake at night, the reason he had pushed so hard for the youth program. "That's why programs like ours matter so much," he said. "When your son knows police officers as real people who care about his success, he'll have a different foundation for those future interactions. And when officers know kids like your son as individuals with dreams and potential, they'll approach those interactions differently too." Jennifer took the microphone for closing remarks, her confidence much stronger than when she had started the evening. "I want to announce that First National Bank will be partnering with the police department to expand the youth program next year. We're providing financial literacy workshops and college scholarship opportunities for program participants. It's our way of investing in the positive changes that came from a very difficult day." After the forum ended, people lingered in the lobby, continuing conversations and asking questions. Robert found himself surrounded by community members who wanted to share their own experiences with bias and discuss ways to make Millbrook more inclusive. David, the teller who had helped Robert that fateful morning, approached with a smile. "Chief, I have to tell you something. That day when everything happened, I felt terrible that I didn't prevent the misunderstanding somehow. But seeing what's come from it, how it's brought our community together, I think maybe it needed to happen." "You might be right, David," Robert agreed. "Sometimes progress comes from uncomfortable situations that force us to examine ourselves honestly." As the crowd began to disperse, Robert reflected on the journey from that embarrassing morning to this evening of community dialogue. The incident could have divided the town, created resentment between the police department and local businesses, or reinforced negative stereotypes on all sides. Instead, it had become a catalyst for conversations that might never have happened otherwise. Jennifer's willingness to acknowledge her mistakes publicly had inspired others to examine their own biases. The expanded youth program was creating relationships that would benefit the community for decades. And the police department had developed new approaches to bias training that were being adopted by other agencies across the state. Officer Kim walked over as Robert prepared to leave. "Chief, the kids in the program want to know if you'll be at basketball practice tomorrow. They're working on a play they want to show you." "Wouldn't miss it," Robert replied. "Basketball practice has become the best part of my week." As he drove home that evening, Robert thought about the 10-year-old boy whose mother had asked about preparing him for future encounters with bias. That child was now participating in their summer program, learning to see police officers as people who cared about his well-being, rather than threats to be feared. The bank incident had been painful and embarrassing, but it had also opened doors to understanding that might have remained closed otherwise. Robert had learned that even in positions of authority and respect, the work of fighting bias and building bridges never ended. Jennifer had shown that mistakes, when met with humility and commitment to change, could become opportunities for growth. The community had demonstrated that difficult conversations, when approached with good faith and openness, could strengthen rather than divide. Most importantly, 62 kids were spending their summer building positive relationships with law enforcement, learning new skills and seeing expanded possibilities for their futures. They were the real winners in this story, and the reason Robert knew that something good had come from one of the most challenging days of his career. The youth program continued to thrive. The community conversations about bias became a regular part of Millbrook's civic life, and the partnership between the police department and local businesses grew stronger each year. What started as a misunderstanding in a bank lobby had become a model for how communities could address difficult issues with honesty, compassion, and commitment to positive change. Chief Robert Johnson never forgot the lesson of that Tuesday morning, and he made sure his officers understood that building trust required constant attention, genuine respect, and the humility to learn from uncomfortable moments. The badge on his uniform commanded respect, but the relationships he built in the community earned something even more valuable: understanding.